Welcome back to the Make Math Happen podcast. We've been talking about activating lessons, and last week we zeroed in on pre teaching, which we now know can be called acceleration. And essentially, what we're doing is setting the stage for success. Today, we're stepping right into the kitchen. So I'm going to ask that you let me cook because instruction, when done right, is a lot like a recipe. You've got your ingredients, the tasks, you've got your technique, how you facilitate those tasks, and you've got your flavor, the engagement that brings the whole thing to life. When one of those things is missing, the learning just doesn't hit quite right. So today, we're breaking down the recipe for instruction, what you plan, how you facilitate, and how you sustain student engagement from the first bite to the last. Let's start with your ingredients, the tasks themselves. When you're planning, ask yourself 3 questions. Does this task align to the state standards? How does this task build from the last learning experience, and how does it lead to the next one? Is it developmentally right for my students? The reason why I want these questions to come to mind is because sometimes we have curriculum that we are tasked with using that does not completely align to our state standards. So then we have to become like an expert, right? And we have to really dive into our standards and understand what is being asked, what are the objectives, what is the depth of the standard that we want our students to reach, and does this curriculum allow us to do that? And that's something that we have to do every single time that we're planning. Additionally, sometimes the curriculum makes huge leaps. Okay, an example is I'm thinking back to the beginning of the year when my 8th grade teachers were starting with solving equations. In the curriculum, we jumped from fractions to decimals in the same lesson. Now, maybe that could work if all students were on grade level, but many of our students are not. And equations tends to be something that is challenging for our kiddos. So, what would have been better for us to do is start with those integer coefficients, then moving into those fractional coefficients before we get to the decimals. And the reason why is because when we think about our standards and we think about achievement level descriptors, the integer coefficients is proficiency, right? Once we start getting into those fractional and decimal coefficients, now we're working with level 4 and level 5 performance, right? So think about the progression of it. Does it make sense for me to take this big of a leap in a single lesson? And if it doesn't, you have to adjust. Where is it leading from? Where is it leading to? Is it developmentally appropriate? Those are those questions that you always want to ask yourself. If your curriculum already provides the tasks, just like the one that I'm mentioning from my district, then that's great. But you have to remember a pre-packaged meal still needs some seasoning. Some of our curriculum problems are solid mathematically, but not always engaging. They may not start as invitations. So what do? We create the invitation. Okay. So you need to try routines like notice and wonder. You can post an image, a graph, or a pattern from the problem and ask, what do you notice? What do you wonder? You can also do a routine like which one does it belong? Give students 4 related visuals or equations or expressions and let them argue which doesn't fit and why. And in these situations, any of them could be the correct answer. This is just providing students with an opportunity to think about what it is that they see and make sense of it, and then construct their own argument to support what they're sharing. Another routine is number talks. So this is quick mental math prompts that build fluency and reasoning. And if you are a middle school teacher listening to this podcast right now, I know that you know that our kids could use some time to build fluency. So these are 3 routines that you can try. And each of these routines turns a plain worksheet problem into a launch pad for curiosity. We're inviting them in, we're hooking them, we're waking them up, for one. No matter what time of the day your students come to you, whether it's the first thing in the morning or after lunch, we have to wake them up. So, and if you're thinking, I've never facilitated any of these before, don't worry, I got you covered. In the show notes, you're going to see links to either articles or literature or even a video to help you figure out what these routines are and how you can use them in your classroom. Okay, so the first thing was the ingredients, right? That is choosing the right task. So remember, we have to make sure that it's aligned to state standards. We have to make sure that there is a progression there that makes sense, right? How does it connect to what we've done? How does it connect to where we're going? And we also need to make sure that it is developmentally appropriate for our students. Just because we are given a workbook or a teacher textbook does not mean that we can't adapt it for the students who are in our classrooms. So the second part is the technique. So we have to facilitate with purpose. Great facilitation is about balance. You want students doing the heavy lifting while you're orchestrating the learning. So I need you to ask yourself some more questions. What routines will invite students into the math and keep them there? When are students talking? When are they writing or manipulating or working with things hands on? And who's doing the most of the talking? Is it you or is it them? Because the truth is, the person talking the most is the person doing the most thinking. One of my favorite routines to help shift this balance is stronger and clearer each time. Here's how it works. Students work independently to write or solve or think about something first, right? Then they meet with two partners, one at a time, to share and refine their thinking. After those two quick rounds, they revise their original response. It's powerful because students process the math four different times: alone, twice with the peer, and then once through revision before we ever open it up to the full group. Of course, this takes modeling and practice, but it breaks up that fill in the box monotony and gets students talking. And that's what we want. We don't want your classrooms to feel like we're watching paint dry on the walls. Okay. And once you're facilitating those small group or whole group discussions, you can layer in five practices. So that's where before you even get into the classroom, you're already thinking about the goal. You're already anticipating strategies that you expect to see your students doing. Then once you get into the lesson, you're monitoring student work. That means you're walking around the room. You're selecting the student work that you want to share out, but you are intentionally sequencing the work that you want to show out so that you can make connections between the work and to the big idea. Those practices are going to help you stay intentional rather than reactive during discussions. So when we talk about this technique, facilitating with purpose, it isn't always choosing one thing, although we can start there so that we can master something, right? It's better to be a master of one thing than to be a master of no things because you're doing too many things at once. But you can also layer these strategies. You can layer these techniques. I just talked about how we can use stronger and clearer and layer that with five practices as well. So kind of keep that in mind as you are working through your recipe. Now, part three is your flavor. Okay. That is designing for the engagement that we want to have. And a lot of times when we think about engagement, we think about or some people think about things being super exciting or, students laughing, or maybe they even visualize environments like what we see in Ron Clark's school, which would be great. But we know the reality is that is not going to happen every single day for all of our classrooms. When I'm talking about engagement, I'm talking about students truly interacting with the content. I'm talking about students talking about it. I'm talking about students moving around the room. I'm talking about students doing the math. Okay. So again, every single recipe needs flavor, and that's your engagement. That's how they're interacting with your content. Engagement doesn't happen by accident, though. It is designed into the lesson. It's not going to just happen because you want it to happen, because you're going to think that it's going to happen. It happens because you're planning for it to happen. So I want you to think about, how will students move? Okay. We know that students have short attention spans, so it's probably going to be a good practice for us to have those strong, solid classroom procedures in place, right? Respect across our classroom so that we can do things that allow students to move. Oftentimes, when teachers are scared to move, to allow students to transition around the room, is because they don't want to lose control. So that's why it's important to really set the tone at the beginning of the year, because that just opens the door for all of these. I'm going to say fun because every student is not going to find math to be fun, but I definitely believe it is more engaging than sitting in a desk and watching your teacher at the front of the room. Okay. So again, asking yourself, how will students move? Do you have some gallery walks? Do you have partner rotations? Do you have stand and share moments? Are you doing the stronger and clearer routine that I shared earlier? How will they talk? Oftentimes, I hear teachers talking about students not knowing how to articulate their thinking. So we can provide them with sentence stems, right? So there is a discussion supports math language routine that gives you, based off the language function, it gives you different sentence stems and frames that you can use to help students organize their thinking. In addition to that, we can do vocabulary banks. Imagine if you had a set of vocabulary for this particular set of lessons that you had up on your wall for students to see. So not only do I have sentence stems, I have a bank that I can choose from so that I'm practicing using my academic vocabulary. Wow, you really doing something. And then there's also those accountable talk prompts. So again, we're just providing students with support. It's still their ideas. We're just helping them organize them so that their peers can understand what it is that they are sharing. And we're really building their capacity for what they're going to see on future activities, future assessments, future grades, right? We're giving them that practice they need to use the academic language. The other thing about engagement is how will they do? We first ask how will they move, we next ask how will they talk, now how will they do? How will they do the math? What manipulatives are they going to use? What models, or are there digital tools that are going to make the thinking visible? We need to think about all those things and prepare for those things. I've seen instances where there were applets included or embedded within a lesson, and the teacher didn't plan for that in advance. And then when it was time to roll it out, they spent so much time figuring out the applet while trying to train the students on the applet that the lesson objective got lost. So we have to plan for all of those things. So use these supports to make participation possible for everyone, especially your English language learners and students who process best through collaboration. In the last episode, I mentioned there's going to be times where you guys may say, almost all of my students need acceleration. How do I manage that and still get through the lesson? Here's the thing. When the majority of your class needs readiness support, acceleration becomes a whole group strategy. So look for connections across concepts. I'm actually going to be talking about this at the state math conference that's coming up in a couple of weeks in Winston-Salem. Super excited about this session because it's important that we as adults see the connections across these different concepts, but also make those connections visible for our students so that they realize that the things that they're learning do not exist on an island, right? They are deeply connected. Okay. We can connect fractions to ratios. We can use patterns in products to foreshadow exponents. We can revisit area models when introducing distributive property or factoring. When you plan those connections into your instruction, acceleration doesn't feel like an extra step. It's already embedded in the design of the lesson itself. Okay, so I want to refer back to my district. Okay, so we have, with the curriculum that we're using, we have workbooks. I don't want you to let the boxes within that workbook drive your instruction. You are going to drive your instruction. The students in your class are going to drive your instruction. Those pages are containers, right? But they're not constraints. Students should be doing talking and reasoning long before they start writing answers. Use the workbook to synthesize their thinking after the exploration, not to replace the exploration. Give them time to make sense first, then capture what they've learned. And I know when we're thinking about, oh, this is a new curriculum, or man, I just started teaching, or man, I'm new to the country. I don't know how to do all of these things. Talk to a peer, because I bet you there's somebody in your building who has this figured out. And if there isn't someone in your building, reach out to someone that's in your district. And if there's nobody in your district that has it figured out, please email me because I am willing to help. I am definitely willing to help. You are not in this alone. Okay. But again, I do not want you to be so indebted to the pages within your workbook that you miss out on opportunities to extend students' learning and their thinking. So here's the recipe for instruction in a nutshell. Tasks are your ingredients. Choose them carefully and season them with curiosity. Facilitation is your technique. Structure opportunities for students to process, talk, and refine. Engagement is the flavor. Make it hands-on, social, and accessible. And remember, your classroom is the kitchen. You set the tone, you adjust the heat, and you make the learning happen. Check the show notes for descriptions of Notice and Wonder, which one doesn't belong, number talks, and stronger and clearer each time. Until next time, friends, keep making math happen, one recipe at a time.